At some point, you stop asking whether people love you. You start asking a different question. Which version of you they're loving? Some people don't struggle with intimacy because they don't want love. They struggle because love has never felt completely safe. Not impossible. Not unwanted. Just unpredictable. For some gay men, intimacy doesn't begin with trust. It begins with calculation. How much of myself is safe to reveal? How quickly will they lose interest? What part of me needs editing before they can stay? These questions rarely get said out loud. They sit quietly underneath every conversation, every date, every unanswered text. Because intimacy was never really about letting someone get close. It's about believing they'll still be there after they actually see you. And for some people, that belief broke long before their first relationship. Long before dating apps. Long before they even understood who they were. Here's the part most people miss. This isn't fear of commitment. It's something more specific. And once you see it, you can't unsee it in your own life. Growing up learning that authenticity could cost you connection changes how you experience closeness for the rest of your life. Quietly, over time, without anyone noticing. Most people picture intimacy as a destination. You arrive and you're close. For some gay men, intimacy feels more like a risk assessment. Not because they're incapable of closeness. Because they became experts at something else first. Emotional adaptation. Reading rooms. Reading faces. Reading tone. Scanning a reaction before deciding whether it's safe to speak honestly. That habit starts as protection. Give it a few years and it stops being a habit. It becomes personality. Quick gut check. Does any of this sound like you? Not the whole thing. Just one line of it. Keep that in mind because it matters for what's coming next. When your nervous system learns that acceptance is conditional, being emotionally transparent starts to feel reckless, even around people who've actually earned your trust. That's the part that trips people up. The body remembers old danger a lot longer than the mind does, which is why someone can desperately want deep love and still instinctively pull away the second it becomes real. From the outside, that looks confusing. From the inside, it feels necessary. But here's where it actually gets more complicated, because modern dating didn't just fail to fix this. It made it sharper. Endless options. Infinite profiles. Infinite conversations. Infinite better possibilities one swipe away. So people start comparing connections before they've even experienced them. Attention becomes abundant. Understanding becomes rare. And that creates a split most people never name out loud. Being desired is easy. Being known is not. Those are two completely different experiences, and dating apps only ever built for the first one. Some people get incredibly skilled at attracting others, and then quietly panic the moment someone wants to know who they actually are. Because attraction can be managed. Intimacy can't. Real intimacy eventually reaches the parts you've carefully organized. The insecurities, the contradictions, the grief, the conversations you've never finished having with yourself. That's exactly where the performance starts to crack. Many gay men spend years building versions of themselves that are just easier for other people to understand. Not fake. Adapted. Sometimes more masculine. Sometimes softer. Sometimes endlessly confident. Sometimes emotionally untouchable. Not dishonest, just built on a simple rule survival teaches before authenticity ever gets the chance. Flexibility keeps you safe. And that's exactly how you end up asking that question from the beginning of this video. Not, do they love me? Which version of me do they love? That question follows relationships everywhere. especially into the moments that are supposed to feel the safest. Compliments start feeling suspicious. Affection starts feeling temporary. Silence starts feeling predictive. You start hunting for evidence that abandonment has already begun. Not because it has. Because uncertainty became familiar a long time ago, and familiar feels safer than unknown, even when familiar hurts. Psychologists have a clinical name for this: hypervigilance. It doesn't feel clinical. It feels like constantly checking emotional weather. Was that message shorter than usual? Did their voice just change? Did I say too much? Too little? Every interaction turns into data. Every pause turns into a possible warning sign. Eventually, love stops feeling like connection and starts feeling like surveillance. Constant, exhausting, self-imposed surveillance. And social media doesn't help. It quietly makes it worse. People aren't just comparing relationships anymore. They're comparing emotional presentation. The smiling couple photos, the anniversaries, the vacations, everything engineered to look effortless. Real intimacy is never that clean. But algorithms don't reward depth. They reward visibility. So the internet taught an entire generation how to look emotionally available, without ever teaching them how to actually become emotionally safe. Those are two different skills. One gets attention. The other builds trust. And trust, unlike a feed, doesn't grow on a schedule. Now here's where a lot of people are going to feel personally called out, and I want you to sit with it instead of scrolling past it. Modern hookup culture adds a layer most people never talk about honestly. To be clear, casual intimacy isn't inherently harmful. For a lot of people it's healthy, respectful, even genuinely fulfilling. But when physical closeness becomes easier than emotional honesty, something subtle starts happening underneath the surface. Bodies meet. Stories don't. Desire shows up fast. Understanding doesn't always follow. Repeat that enough times, and the mind quietly starts separating physical intimacy from emotional vulnerability. Not on purpose. Protectively. You learn how to be touched without ever being emotionally seen. Then, one day, someone actually wants emotional closeness, the real thing. And instead of relief, you feel exposed. Because physical vulnerability got practiced for years. Emotional vulnerability never did. People call this emotional unavailability. Half the time, it's actually just emotional unfamiliarity. And that distinction changes everything about how you fix it. There's one more pattern that makes all of this harder to break, and it disguises itself as love. Reassurance. At first it feels comforting, then necessary, then quietly addictive. You ask if everything's okay. You need confirmation, then you need it again. Not because you don't trust the other person, because your nervous system doesn't trust stability itself. When rejection has shaped your expectations, consistency starts to feel temporary. Every good moment secretly turns into a countdown. Every peaceful week feels a little too quiet. The mind starts preparing for a loss that doesn't exist yet. That preparation feels responsible in the moment. But it quietly steals the only thing you actually have, the present. And here's the cruelest part of the whole pattern. The harder someone tries to prevent abandonment, the less emotionally present they actually become. Not because they don't care. Because fear moved into the space where connection was supposed to live. One more thing modern relationships get wrong constantly. Mistaking accessibility for intimacy. Constant texting, location sharing, instant replies, non-stop updates. People confuse being reachable with being emotionally understood. They are not the same thing. Someone can answer every message you send and still never know what you're actually afraid of. Someone can spend every weekend next to you and still never meet the person you've been hiding, even from yourself. Intimacy doesn't grow from frequency. It grows from recognition, from the moments where nothing needs performing, nothing needs editing, nothing needs proving. If your identity has always required an explanation, those moments feel almost foreign the first few times they happen. So here's the deepest layer of this, the thing underneath everything you just heard. Many gay men weren't only learning who they were also learning constantly how much of themselves the world would actually allow. That creates a unique kind of emotional math. Not everyone runs it. But for the people who do, intimacy stops being just romance. It becomes evidence. Evidence that authenticity can survive closeness. Evidence that honesty doesn't automatically end in rejection. Evidence that being fully known doesn't automatically mean being left. That evidence doesn't arrive all at once. It builds quietly, conversation by conversation, relationship by relationship, moment by moment. Because real intimacy was never built on one dramatic declaration. It's built on repeated experiences of emotional safety. The kind that asks for nothing but your presence. The kind that doesn't demand self-editing. The kind that rewards honesty instead of performance. In a world obsessed with optimization and branding and endless comparison, that kind of intimacy has gotten rare. People have gotten incredibly good at attracting attention. Most have forgotten how to create emotional rest. And maybe that's what so many people are actually searching for underneath everything else. Not perfection. Not constant excitement. Not endless validation. Emotional rest. A place where identity stops feeling like a negotiation. Where silence doesn't automatically mean rejection. Where being understood finally matters more than being impressive. Because the deepest fear was never really being alone. It's believing that if someone saw the entire truth, they'd decide to leave. That's where this all started, with a question. Which version of me do they love? But it doesn't have to end there. Because the opposite of hiding was never exposure. The opposite of hiding is finally learning that the real you was never something you had to earn the right to keep.